Awesome. We're live. Hello, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube colleagues. I'm Becky Carlson, the curator of Learning Pioneers, a community committed to being the change in education. And I'm here with the wonderful Maree Whiteley from Purposeful Pedagogies. We're going to have a conversation about some things we think really matter in education, and we warmly invite you to be part of this conversation. So Maree, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you, Becky. I'm just thrilled to be here and to be able to be part of the Learning Pioneers that has all these wonderful opportunities. But a little bit about myself. I've been a teacher and educator for many years. And recently, the last probably 10, 12 years, I've been working with teachers as a teaching and learning consultant in Perth for the Association of Independent Schools, which is great because I get to still be in the classroom and still see what's current and happening. And and the last couple of years, I've really dipped into the Learning Pioneers community. So yeah, we're going to just have a little chat about that, I guess.
Yeah, so much synergy in what we're doing, Maree, and we'll see through this conversation, excuse me, the amazing things that you're doing and the systemic shifts you're helping teachers to make, and just how carefully you're thinking through that, kind of curating that content and that program for them. So that will kind of come out. And I really hope that educators will take from that kind of the importance of mindfulness and doing things so purposefully, and actually, since this is streaming to LinkedIn, so many of the connections I have on LinkedIn, I'm connected with lots of educators. And what I love about LinkedIn is there's this crossover between education and business. And we talk a lot in Learning Pioneers about what we can learn from business and what education can learn from business. So I love LinkedIn for that. So that kind of, no matter where we're working or where we're making impact, how mindful and purposeful we're being within that impact, how intentional are we? So let's dive in. I'll frame the conversation, Maree, and then we'll dive in and share some thinking. So Maree and I were chatting yesterday, and we were talking about what we wanted the focus of this conversation to be. And Maree came up with 3 words. She came up with perspective, belonging, and agency. And these are 3 things we both think really matter in education. I would suggest they really matter in business too. And they're 3 things that matter for and with our students in the classroom, and they matter on an institutional level within our educational settings, so for leadership, thinking about how they're setting up the context of their school. So the first thing I'd invite you to do before we start our conversation is reflect on a scale of 0 to 10, how important do you think agency is in the classroom and in a school institution or in business? How important do you think it is to gain perspective? And how important do you think belonging is in the classroom, in a school as a whole, for all of the families that are part of that school, every single member and staff member of that school? And if you're working in business, how important is belonging in business? So I'd suggest you reflect on that now. And I'd really love to hear at the end of the conversation, has that number changed? Or do you think it's all 10, 10, 10? Or do you think, do you have different numbers and they shift within the conversation? Welcome, Iniat. Really nice to see you. And it's really nice because we've been interacting a bit on LinkedIn. So welcome, and we'd love to hear your thoughts as we go through this conversation. So I guess as a starting point, Maree, should we start with belonging, the kind of why of belonging and how that's integrated into the work you do, and how that links with Learning Pioneers and why we think that's important? Do you want to get started with belonging?
Sure. I think belonging was something that really came to me in designing the Purposeful Pedagogies. It's a PL, professional learning program. I'll just put it out there if people are not familiar with that, where I invite teachers to participate. It's a 6-month program, so it has a bit of everything. There's face-to-face workshops, there's online courses, there's webinars, there's reading. There's actually professional reading. So giving teachers the time to actually reflect on their practice. So the term reflective practice is something that wasn't, I can't remember it like 20, 30 years ago, coming to be so important that we actually have a name for it. And I think if we have a name for it, we need to allow educators to have the time to delve in and do that. So that's at the heart of this. And so I think belonging is really something where we can we all need to feel safe, and we all need to feel part of something. So I think having a professional learning community, the purposeful pedagogy is a community because the teachers all come from different schools, but by the time they have interacted with each other in the framework over the 6 months, they really have that sense of belonging to the group. And since now we're in our 3rd year, we even have an alumni. So we have the other teachers who've been in the program for the last 3 years, who've come back, who dip in and out and give back. That's another huge part of the belonging. And so when I was researching and looking at how we can extend the course each year, because I'm learning and it's part of my growth as well, I was looking for something else or a little bit broader, because we're here in Perth, Western Australia. So I was looking for something that was a little bit more global and a little bit more international. And that's when I came across, and I'd been familiar with your work, Becky, and Guy Claxton, with your book, Powering Up Children, the Learning Power Approach. And I thought, and that's when I joined the Learning Pioneers last year. So I've been in the community for 2 years now. So I dipped my toe in and thought, let me have a go first and see what this community is all about. And I loved it from the get-go. I was in a masterminds group. I felt valued. My opinions were heard. I felt that real sense of belonging with essentially people online that I didn't know. I didn't know, but you just share so much, sharing practice, feeling safe to celebrate each other's practice. I love the way all the masterminds start with a win. So you're already starting on a positive note. So that's wonderful. So I thought, this is what I need in the next course. So that's when we brought in the Learning Pioneers and the Learning Power Approach, part of the Purposeful Pedagogy course this year, because it is about pedagogy. The course essentially is the how. How are we teaching? So I was looking for pedagogies that had purpose and had intention. And that's what all of those things I could see in the Learning Power Approach. So the belonging is a real integral part of the program, and helping teachers feel safe in a group to learn together.
There is so much there, Maree. I don't know whether we're going to get onto like agency and perspective, but you've got perspective within that. But yeah. I love how you started with reflection and how important that is for the learning process. And like you were saying, through purposely running these programs, Purposeful Pedagogies and Learning Pioneers, we're learning too, and the process of our thinking changes. When I look at our program in Learning Pioneers for next year, I just look at it and I'm like, we're going to be different people by the end of this. We're going to have completely reshaped our thinking. And so reflection has really, really landed in my mindset this year through working with you, through our masterminds, through the people we've had in Learning Pioneers, through some of the conferences that I go to outside of that to kind of shape my thinking further. So 2 people who've inspired that. One is John Hattie. So I going to his conference in London. He was talking about, he's got that phrase, know thy impact, and that whole thing about reflective practice and how do teachers know that they're having the impact they're having? So we talk a lot in Learning Pioneers about making the unconscious conscious, and whether we're unconsciously competent or incompetent, we need to know what we're doing and why. And if it's unconscious incompetence, we need to be forgiving on ourselves and kind of when we know better, do better. So taking that, and then also taking Ron Berger, who was one of our last speakers in Learning Pioneers, and him talking about the power of purposeful feedback, slowing down to make time for that, and giving that positive feedback so that you keep doing those things that you're doing and doing them well. And I guess that's what the wins are about as well, partly. If we're recognizing what we're doing well, we keep doing it and keep embedding that. That's it. So yeah, that was the first thing I was picking up on. But there was so much more. I don't know whether you want to come back with anything to do with reflection from what I said.
I think picking up on the win, because sometimes you'd come to those sessions and you'd think, oh gosh, what a day I've had. And then having to think of a win, it just changed your whole mindset and your whole sharing. And celebrating with others. So I think that's really important. And I think what you picked up on, tapping into the expertise that we have around us, and that's the same with me. I'm a reader, and I'm always looking for experts and other people we can bring in, because the wealth of sharing, these experts that come along, into the group is so invaluable, because it just adds that other depth and that rigor to the process. So that's the core of the course as well, is linking up with the with people through the webinars, etc.
So I'm gonna come back to that, because that's perfect, because that's a perfect segue into perspective. So I'm going to come back to it, but I just want to focus on the wins aspect for a little bit, because everything you're sharing, I know everything you do in purposeful pedagogies is so intentional and so well thought out and curated. It's like kind of, well, let's look at this. This is, purposeful pedagogies is a genius name. It is, it is what it says, So we're going to look at this, and that's going to match an overlap here, but then we're going to bring in another perspective here. So that's so powerful in shaping our thinking and being empowered through pedagogy, being empowered through our knowledge and our knowing what makes the biggest impact in children's lives. But just picking up on the wins aspect. So we started WINS because of one of our inspiring thinkers, Adrian Bethune, who I think we had in 2 years ago now, but he was looking at developing well-being in our classrooms and for ourselves, like that real basis of just making sure that we're well set up to do our jobs. And he was sharing peak end theory that says if you finish your day on a high, on a win, you're more likely to see that whole day as a positive day, even if you've had loads of stuff going on. And our brain is wired to stick to the negative. I think it's like, let me get it the right way around, kind of Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. It's going to slip off.
Absolutely.
So that's how we started with threading WINS into Learning Pioneers. And now Diksha's running those monthly WINS posts for the whole community. And we have that, part of our masterminds. So I would invite people, because this has happened in Learning Pioneers, where are you celebrating your own personal wins? And where is that thread into your whole institution? So just to share a couple of examples of that, one of the members of our mastermind on Tuesdays at 4:00, which is now going to completely focus on developing the learning power approach. So if you're interested in that, get in touch, because we're gathering a cohort of teachers for that. But one of the members of that group started just at the end of the day journaling into her wins. So the end of her school day, the first thing she did was just pick up a notebook, which was on a desk, and write down all the things that had gone well. And I thought that's so genius, because we have, as teachers, there's so many things that are thrown at us. And if we just take that time just to reflect and actually realize there were a lot of things that went really well today. There was this one thing that threw me off, but all these things went well. You personally kind of grow from that. And then on a kind of institutional level, there are people in staff rooms who share, what's going well this week. And that's part of that kind of virtuous cycle. So just segueing then into the perspective aspect, because that's what you were starting to share. Could you share a little bit about how you've curated purposeful pedagogies this year? What was your thinking behind the program that you put together this year?
Okay, well, I think this year I build on from year to year, but I think the perspective that I bring is like yourself. It's other professional and personal learning experiences that I've had in the past. And one of the very strong, because my work is basically built around the humanities. The humanities learning area is my area of my work. And then that also, of course, it brings that human element into that. Okay, so the human, the global citizenship kind of aspect. So with that, I attended a few years ago some workshops, and I've been a real fan of David Price along the way, and his book, and which The Power of Us. I'm going to show books as we go along. The Power of Us really is about the perspective of not educators. This is about stories of human being, human endeavor, and how we can overcome and innovate. And initially when the teachers start reading this, because this is the main core text of the course, The Power of Us. And when teachers start reading it, it's like, oh, why are we reading? This isn't an what's this got to do with, education? But then as you get reading it, it really, David Price uses the term socially purposeful. And I love that. I love the fact that we can all do better. We can all help each other. And what I've noticed in all the people that I'm leaning into have that very kind, compassionate, human approach to their work, personally and professionally. So the whole thing around relationships matter. It's just a thing. It's just there. It's there all the time. So I think perspective wise, I seem to be drawn to people who have that same giving perspective of humanity and how we can move forward. And what a wonderful thing to bring into your classroom and to bring to children. So all of and then I discovered Mark Finesse in the work. I hadn't been there, so that was great to actually have that relationships work. So all the perspectives that are coming into the Purposeful Pedagogies course not just have purpose, but they have intention and they have goodwill. They have a really kind spirit behind them, and I think, even people, that some of the online courses and things that we've been doing from the work of Ron Richard, Trevor McKenzie, Kath Murdoch, all of these people have been a very integral part of this course. And to the point where we'll get to the end of the course and we're doing the exhibition and they're still like yourself, Becky. It's like, what can I do? How can I support you? And even recording personal messages back to the teachers, like getting back to belonging. How much more belonging is there in that kind of community that will support you, not just to come in and do a one-off workshop or a one-off webinar, but then actually be so, so supportive and so intentional in keeping up and saying, well, how are they going? Is there anything more I can do? So I guess bringing those, the perspective part of it, they're the perspectives that seem to be drawn into this work.
Again, got loads of things to say about that. But first of all, the perspective piece. What I've noticed in the process of working with educators and learning pioneers is that power of perspective. And it was Amy Kirk who first picked up on it. I've got a really good snippet of her talking about, we were talking about, what is it about learning pioneers? What do you get from learning pioneers? What's the best bit about it? And she's just really good at distilling things into one word. And she said, if I could use one word, it would be perspective. And then she's sharing about how, if you're looking at developing your practice in a certain way, like you were saying, here's Kath Murdoch talking about it in this way. Here's Guy Claxton talking about it in another way, and you start to have this perspective from all these different angles. And that empowers you. Like I talk a lot about, we can't empower people, they have to empower themselves. But if we create the environment that has that perspective and people tap into that, they become bulletproof in what they're doing. They become that pedagogy becomes part of their DNA. And no outside agency can come in and say what you're doing is wrong, because in your bones that you're having that positive impact of belonging, of relationships, of incredible, powerful learning. That's happening for and with your children and your students. So that's the power, the power that perspective brings.
Just can I just mention that word, coincidentally, the first cohort of teachers that went through the course, all the titles of the books that were chosen, we had The Power of Us, we had The Power of Making Thinking Visible, Ron Richard. We had The Power of Inquiry, and then we've got Powering Up the Children. So how powerful is that learning, Becky? Let me tell you.
I love that.
You love that?
Yeah, there's something about the word power. Do you know, it's so interesting because there's a series of blog posts on the Learning Pioneers website written by an incredible educator called Kath Pratt that are about the power dynamic in education and where power comes from. And it's all, the kind of the essence of it is power from within. And that, and what you were sharing with the kinds of people who you look for and you look to work with, that kind of authenticity, the kind of people who say, how can I help? Isn't that the nicest question to be asked when you're trying to create something? Who are just really genuine and kind. That's power from within. That's power from a place of centeredness and deep, deep care is a different power to like power over, which is perhaps what lots of people have experienced in the education system. What was the second thing I was going to pick up on? You were talking about perspective, and then there was another element I wanted to pick up on. It's
just about the intention of that power and how some people have quoted who just often say powerful pedagogies, and I'm going, oh no, it's purposeful pedagogies, but it is powerful as well. So that's sort of that's an indication, but it also leads into, and we're going to talk about agency in a moment, but I know the agency that comes with teachers who have got choice and can, these are suggested readings, you know, there's some text that we look at more deeply, but they will sit with the teachers forever. When you give them something in their hands, when you give them readers, when you treat them professionally as professionals, I think that's something to behold. I mean, you know, I still love it when someone gives me a book and the time, like I said, the time to really dive into it, which is another feature of the Learning Pioneers, with the book studies and actually having that time to look through the chapters and then go away and try it. And then come back and report. That's the thing. It's like, okay, we can read a book and have a book study and have a review, but what's changed? How did that impact you?
That's that reflection again, isn't it?
Yes,
it's like I think we've got a social post that's from inspiration to perspiration, and it's that, you know, you're reading a book, it's inspiring you. How are you putting that into action, and how are you making time to reflect on that and see if the action had the impact you were looking for? And even before that, how are you being intentional with it? So it's kind of like this continual cycle of learning. So yeah, one more aspect on that before we go into agency. A lot of what you've spoken about speaks to what I think every single human needs, and that's being seen, heard, and valued. And I think in our classrooms, it comes back to belonging again. In our classrooms, in our institutions, in the learning communities we set up, are we creating the conditions for which people feel seen, heard, and valued? Because when they do, that's their launch pad to take risks, to be innovative, to do incredible things. So that basis of belonging, of strong relationships, of well-being, these are all the first design principle of the learning power approach. And the more that we inquire into that in Learning Pioneers, the more I realize that it's very, very rich, very, very complex, and really important. And so much goes unconsciously not noticed. So like our first inquiry in September, well, okay, first if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, halfway through the year if you're in Australia, but our next inquiry is on belonging and inclusion. And I think it's so important because we all want to feel like we belong and be included. And we all think we're creating belonging and inclusion, but it's the unconscious stuff we're doing that is making people feel not included. And we've got to be brave to look at that. So I think it's a really important start point. One more point, book studies, powerful as well. The word powerful comes back. The power of reading and the power of learning that, you know, just in a learning institution, in education, in business too, how intentional are you with reading? You know, how like I've worked in schools that have incredible like educational libraries. That's a great start. You know, how accessible are books? And do you have book clubs? Do you have spaces where people can come and reflect and build on those? So easy to set up a book club. So just a few ideas for schools as well. So let's go into agency then. So you were alluding a little bit to how important you felt that was. How is agency built into purposeful pedagogies?
Well, I mean, we talk a lot about student agency at the moment. That's a very buzzword, but I also, unless the teachers see themselves as learners, they also need agency. And I think we've really moved past the era of, you know, teachers and whole staffs being herded into a hall for a 1 day of professional learning. They all come out. They all, you know, it's really like, you know, choice, voice and choice. And I think teachers deserve that. So I love the aspect when I see it quite often now. I see schools having, when they're having their professional learning days, and the voice and choice comes from within. They're actually presenting to each other. They're sharing ideas and they're choosing which session. There's concurrent sessions. So that's basically how we want to build the purposeful pedagogies model as well. You know, initially there's a timetable of workshops and online courses. Some are optional, some are required because that's part of the final design process. Because in the course, I'm actually modeling the project-based learning approach and design thinking. So yes, we have a provocation. We have and mostly the provocation book has been The Power of Us, something to get us thinking. And then it's like, well, where's the questioning? Then we have the finding out. Then we have the tuning in. Then we have it. And so whatever model of inquiry-based learning is one of our purposeful pedagogies. The learning power approach is another one. Project-based learning, all of these the teachers are exposed to. And then again, they, depending on their context, depending on their students' questions and what they're learning about, because let's face it, we've all still got a mandated curriculum. We still have to teach certain things, but that shouldn't dominate the learning. That shouldn't dominate the excitement. So I guess it's a way of teaching teachers the how. So very early on in this role that I'm in, we had a new Australian curriculum that came out in 2010, 2011. So basically, I was one of the consultants brought in to unpack the history curriculum and the humanities. But then once we got we all got past it. Okay, we know what's in there. Now, how are we going to do it? So that's when the how, the pedagogy, the questioning, and all of those things came into play. So I think agency is not just for teachers. It's and now with all the online learning, and you have all the technology that's brought into it as well, we have teachers who are flying. They're just doing their own thing in their own time. They're getting on doing all these little online courses. They're getting micro credentials. They're going and doing their university studies, whatever. They're doing all that behind the scenes. So why herd them all into the same professional learning? Gives them some choice. So that's another thing I love about Learning Pioneers, because there's so many different ways. The agency is there. So when a whole school or a whole staff comes to do it, you have that collective efficacy that John Hattie talks about. And I love organising those events. And at this moment, I'm actually organising. We've got Trevor McKenzie and Jessica Vance on their way to Perth. So these two techs are going to be included in the workshop for everybody that comes. So what a wonderful thing for them to then, hear from these two speakers, have 2 days of workshops and going through the process of really practical things that they can do with their students, and then have the tools to take back and start, do it at whatever stage they're at, whatever agency level they're at, and then keep connecting it. Again, what I've found is the inquiry community is so generous and so giving that if you stay connected with people, then that's another thing about agency. Part of the Purposeful Pedagogy course is to connect. And how do we do that? We do that because I'm often asked, how do you get these people to come and how do you get these people on board? It's just through, again, building a relationship. And you can build an online social, it's called social media for a reason. It needs to be social. And I think it's not just a one way, because we have a lot of these people that are very generous and they do share a lot online. But I think giving back is a way that teachers can connect and show and practice those things that we need our students to be able to do now as well, on that level. So I think that's where the agency comes in, and also the reflective practice is that all the teachers in the course are documenting. They're documenting their learning, they're documenting their personal learning, they're documenting their professional learning, and they're sharing with each other and commenting back. So the feedback cycle continues as well.
I've got loads to pick up on in that as well, Maree. I'm just going to pick up on Iniat's put in the chat. Our students are lacking in a global outlook, and what's the solution? One solution I would say for that is what you've been talking about, Maree, is connecting us as educators, connecting with internationally yes, with other educators, which is what Purposeful Pedagogy is about, Learning Pioneers is about too. But through that, we gain that perspective and we gain that outlook, and we can then think about really mindfully and purposefully how to kind of bring that to our students and do that collectively with our students and create those connections too. I've also got this book to hand. I'm reading it at the moment. But this would be, I would highly recommend this to leaders looking to create that culture for learning that is steeped in agency, because like what I've seen Jessica speak as well, and she just has so many neat ideas for just shifting and changing from that kind of top-down model to a more kind of distributed leadership where we're all involved in bringing forward a better, better approach for them with our students. There's a really great quote I want to share, actually, from one of our inspirers in Learning Pioneers, James Adu, who has a company called Innerscope and develops 5 Voices coaching. And when he was coaching with our team, he said, what if every interaction you had was a vote for the culture you want to establish? And I thought that was so powerful.
That's
it's
amazing.
all of our collective responsibility to show up as the best educators we can be, as the best humans we can be. So number one, what is that culture? And number two, how are you showing up as that person? So yeah, and I guess
can I just chime in? I mean, that question that came, how can we connect globally? A really neat aspect of the Purposeful Pedagogies course is that the teachers, when they're actually choosing what the topic or focus is going to be of their project, because they do then have to translate their learning into a project for the students to do, we focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. So the global goals are something that you can connect really easily across Twitter or Facebook groups or LinkedIn, anywhere. There's so much really positive sharing of student work and all these beautiful ideas, again based in humanity and the topics that that kids want. They want to know. There's a lot of kids that are worried. They're worried about their world. So that's an aspect to channel that, because there's a very sometimes loud narrative on the profession and on the things that are keeping teachers from. That's overwhelming. Sometimes the doom and gloom of our teaching profession and the narrative by everybody else who is not a teacher and is very confronting. So it's lovely to be part of a psychologically safe community, again at Learning Pioneers, but also the communities that we build up in the belonging sense. You have to be part of that noise. Let that be for the politicians and the other people to sort out the compliance issues. But what goes on in our classrooms, we have agency and we have a voice to be able to control that to some level.
Yeah, and I think that is a really nice time to wrap things up. We talked about belonging, perspective, and agency. We did it within half an hour. Maree, it's always such a joy to speak with you, and there's so much to take from this. So I'm just going to reflect back on the question we had at the beginning. On a scale of 0 to 10, how important you feel agency is, perspective, and a sense of belonging, and has that changed during this chat? Or has it stayed the same? We'd love to hear what your thoughts are behind the importance of belonging, agency, and perspective. So we'll wrap things up there, Maree, and thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, as always. Thanks, Becky.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.